Ahoy there, Harvard scholars and silver dollars. Cheese. Everybody, my name is John, and welcome to ADITW, a day in the Word, the internet's favorite Bible study. So I have this red letter Bible where everything that Jesus said is printed in red. But when I was really little, like before I could read, I thought that the Bible was just one long monologue of something that God said. And so I thought that what was written in black was God talking, and what was written in red, because red is bad, was Satan talking. Boy, did I have that one backwards. Today we are going to study a chapter that is nearly all red letters in my Bible. Today we are diving into Matthew chapter 7. And I want to specifically focus on the second half of this chapter today. Let's start by reading verses 15 through 20. So here, Jesus is describing the difference between true and false prophets, saying how on the outside they will both look very similar, like sheep, but underneath, the false prophets are actually ferocious wolves. And the way that we know the difference, Jesus says, is by their fruit, or by their deeds, and what their deeds produce. Now, I'm gonna talk more about this, but real quick, I wanna move on to the next section. Let's read verses 21 through 23. Now here, Jesus is talking about true versus false disciples. And yet again, true and false disciples can look, or in this case, sound very similar. They can say the same things, or they can proclaim the same words. But Jesus says once again that the difference between the true disciples and the false disciples is their actions. True disciples are those who do God's will, not merely talk about it. All right, before we unpack all this, let's read one final section. Let's read verses 24 through 27. Now we have these two different types of houses. And once again, I imagine that these two houses look very similar on the outside. But the difference comes in their foundation. One is built on rock, and the other is built on sand. And Jesus is using these homes and their foundation as a metaphor to once again talk about the difference between those who simply hear his commands and those who actually go out and do them. So in this chapter, we have three different examples using three different metaphors. And through all of this talk about sheep's clothing and fruit and houses, Jesus is making the same point over and over and over again. He's saying that true faith is not measured by words, but by how those words translate into action and how that action translates into fruit in our world. And this same sentiment is supported later in the Bible by the writer of James, in James chapter 2, when he says, "If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead." Faith without works is dead. We as Christians are not simply called to say the right things, but we are called to do the good things that Jesus has called us to do. And Jesus himself backs this up. He was not just some good teacher who came and preached some nice sermons and said some nice words. He didn't just talk about serving the poor. He laid hands on the sick. He didn't just talk about caring for the outsider, but his best friends, his closest 12 disciples, were those who were on the fringes of society. And he didn't just talk about bringing redemption, but he backed it up with action by carrying a cross and by laying down his life. Through his life and through his words and through his actions, Jesus modeled the true type of faith that we are called to. And this faith is a faith of action. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning into yet another episode of ADITW. I hope you've enjoyed it. We have now reached Matthew chapter 7, which means we're a fourth of the way through our study of the book of Matthew, which also means that we are going to be taking a slight intermission next week. I'm going to be doing a Bible Q&A next week, so please comment down below and let me know, what are your questions? They can be questions about the Bible, they can be questions about quiet time, they can be questions, anything related to the scriptures. I want to try and answer them. And that's all I have for you. Have a great week. I love you all. Keep being awesome.